hold you to that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great class. It's such a great class. It's great.
I'm gonna have to do some work.
My daughter's-
Golf thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Boot camp before. Okay.
Lori, you good?
We're all good? Oh, thank you so much, yeah. All right, we apologize for the technical issues. I'm going to call this meeting of the Berlin-Boylston School District back to order. Excuse me. We did have some technical issues. We resolved them. We are hopefully live streaming now. And because of those technical issues, I would like to invite Jessica Digby to reread her public comments.
Thank you, Lauren. So they're very brief tonight, just on 2 agenda items, these school year calendar changes. I wrote an email to the school committee last meeting regarding adding in hyperlinks to the documents that are going to be voted upon within the meetings. So community members can actually be aware of what's being voted upon or the changes that are being made. Also, the second comment was on the appointment of Carol Costello as the next superintendent. I listened to her interview last meeting and was very impressed with all of her answers and also for her dedication to the district. But I think several community members brought up the point that no open position was posted and no committee involving parents and I guess staff, I don't know if staff members are involved in the committee members, but no committee was created to hire for this position. So I'd just like you to consider that.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate you doing that twice too. So when we last stopped, we were in the middle of a motion. We had gotten a motion to approve the BBRSD school year calendar, and we had a second, and we were discussing it. So I'd like to present what the changes are. So on the old calendar, October 6th, which is now Tohonto's open house, was going to be a half day at Tohonto for their conferences. So they've gotten rid of that half day. It will now be open house. In exchange, on the 10th of November, there was going to be a half day with conferences just for the elementary school. What they've done is they've made that Thursday, the 10th, a half day for every school in the district. And the conferences will be on those days. So that is the change. Is there any discussion? Yes, Adam?
I know that I already received for my elementary school child a schedule to sign up for conferences on that November 10th day, I think it was. So we know that from a Tohonto standpoint, this isn't going to be disruptive. If they've already, have they started scheduling conferences?
They have not. They're waiting to get those dates to parents, so the parents have secured conferences for their elementary students, so that they can then go and schedule conferences where they're Tohonto students.
Okay.
And there are opening times that don't conflict between the 2 schools and their hours. So they have a half hour before the elementary starts. They also have from 3 to 6, where there are no conferences at Tohonto. They would be able to schedule that time for the elementary school. So we try to build that in without disrupting 2 days, 2 half days for parents and 2 days off. So that was our thinking. We're going to try it and we'll see how it works. We're trying to do everything we can to make this work well. If we have any adjustments, we'll have to reconsider that for next year.
Well, I think as a parent who had a child at BES at one point and one at Tohoto, I would have appreciated the half day for the both of them. So I'm hopeful that that works better for parents as well. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. I am an aye as well. The motion to approve the BBRSD school year calendar changes passes. Could I have a motion to affirm the appointment of Carol Costello as the next superintendent of schools?
So moved.
Second.
Mike, thank you. Discussion. I know some people have prepared statements. Yes, Adam.
Thank you. So I prepared my remark this evening, and we'll just read what I have in front of me, and Christie, I'll send this to you for the record afterwards. On August 9th, something to listen background, on August 9th, Superintendent Zaney informed the school committee of his resignation effective June 30th, 2023, and his plans to begin his retirement on that date. Mr. Zaney's departure meant that he was foregoing the final 2 years of his 5-year contract, which was signed in January 2020 and had been set to expire on June 30th, 2025. 2 weeks later, on August 22nd, the school committee published a feedback form and invited public input on this topic. 112 people submitted valuable feedback. I read all of it. I stated at our last meeting that the feedback we received was by far the most thoughtful and helpful that we've received since I was appointed to the committee a little over a year ago. Thank you to everyone who provided feedback then, and to everyone who has continued to provide feedback in recent days, whether by email, phone, or in person. Thank you even to those who took to Facebook to voice their opinions. The most common responses to our survey indicated that the community's priorities were first, recruiting and retaining exceptional people. Second, enhancing academic and extracurricular offerings. And three, improving the district's communication, culture, and engagement with the community. The school committee chose to begin by evaluating internal candidates before opening an external search. Carol Costello was identified as a qualified internal candidate, and the committee proceeded to publicly interview her 2 weeks ago on September 13th. That's the background. My position on this. So I was initially strongly in favor of us conducting a search to find the next superintendent, a public search and external search. I shared that with Ms. Hart, and I went so far as to ask her to appoint me to chair that search. I wanted to better understand, though, how other school districts handle superintendent vacancies. Through my own research, I found that it is not uncommon for school committees to evaluate internal candidates before conducting an external search, including recent appointments in nearby districts. In March of 2018, the Quabbin Regional School Committee promoted its assistant superintendent, Sheila Muir, without considering external candidates. In December 2018, the Millboro Southboro School Committee promoted its assistant superintendent, Gregory Martineau, without considering external candidates. In March of 2020, the West Boylston School Committee promoted Principal Richard Meager without considering external candidates. In April 2021, the Tantasco School Committee promoted its associate superintendent, Deborah Boyd, without considering external candidates. I'll note that all those superintendents remain in their roles today, despite the fact that the average superintendency is 4 or 5 years.
Less than that.
Less than that. So my mindset on this topic has evolved since the initial announcement of Mr. Zanni's departure. While I was initially a strong proponent of us conducting an external search, my mind has been changed. The reason for that change is the quality of the candidate we have here in front of us all today. Carol Costello checks off all the boxes. The community told us that their top priority is for us to attract and retain excellent people. Current and former teachers and administrators in this district have gone out of their way to express their strong support for Carol's candidacy. They have sought us out. Several of them are here in the room today, not because they have to be, but because they want to demonstrate their support of her candidacy. If we want to keep great teachers and attract new ones, the best way to do that is with Carol Costello as their boss. While change is good, we should balance that desire for change with the value of experience. With 2 interim principals and a relatively inexperienced senior leadership team, I would be hesitant to appoint an external candidate as superintendent at this time, regardless of his or her qualifications or how well they interviewed. Experience as an educator, experience in a regional district, and experience in a community similar to ours were things we heard to be priorities. Carol has experience in a regional district and in a community similar to ours because she's been a part of this regional district and this community for 15 years. The third and final reason for my support of Carol's candidacy tonight is why I intend to vote in favor of her is because of her skills as a communicator. Culture, community engagement, and communication were the third thing that came up most frequently in our feedback that we requested from the community, and I've experienced and seen either one-on-one or in our school committee meetings or in the community how effectively she's able to communicate, build consensus, and work with everyone that she interacts with. So for those reasons, and many others, I'm going to be intending to support Carol's candidacy here this evening.
I have a comment as well. So I took a similar journey as Mr. Wilbur. When I began envisioning how we would find a replacement for Mr. Zangi, I thought about my experiences in industry finding replacement executives in the private sector. We'll often work with a search firm that spends several weeks or months building a pool of potentially qualified candidates. Those candidates are screened, and those interested have an opportunity to apply, and if suitable, go through a multi-phase interview process. All candidates, including internal candidates, are treated and considered equally. The best candidate is then chosen and offered the job. My first impressions, like Mr. Wilbur, was that this was the right approach for our superintendent search. It would not only be fair, but it would also appear fair and transparent to our community. Spending more time considering this approach, I learned that this process would take several months and would come with a heavy price tag, potentially $30,000 or more. We also learned, I believe, from the Mass Association of School Superintendents, that there's not a huge pool of qualified candidates to be found. The process would be slow, it would be expensive, and it would potentially not be fruitful. In the meantime, I became aware of Mrs. Costello's interest in the position. She's impressed me at every interaction I had with her. Her commitment to the learning and development of our children was extremely apparent. She has a unique vision for the district, has earned the respect of her staff and colleagues, and was not afraid to advocate for what's important for our children. She has many years of experience in a variety of roles within the district, most notably that of assistant superintendent. She understands what the district does well and also sees opportunities for improvement, and she knows how to capitalize on those opportunities. Frankly, I thought she'd make a fantastic superintendent, and the likelihood that we would find someone even as close to, as qualified to her was provided. So now I felt conflicted. If I truly felt that Mrs. Costello was the absolute best person for the job, would it still make sense to go through a search and recruiting process? Would it make sense to compromise all of that time that could be spent empowering a new superintendent? Would it make sense to spend the taxpayer money? What would be the argument to do that? Well, the answer for me was optics. We would do it for optics. We would do it to avoid criticism that we didn't look hard enough. I chose to join this committee to influence decisions that will help drive our school district, to give our kids the best possible educational experience and to maximize their potential, regardless of optics. From my perspective, Mrs. Costello will be an absolute rock star of a superintendent and a blessing to this school district and the children within it. I concluded that I could not, in good faith, support what would ultimately be a dog and pony show in the recruiting process, wasting taxpayer money, delaying the opportunity for a new superintendent to start executing the vision. That does not help the children in our school district. I'll say it again, Mrs. Costello will be a rock star of a superintendent. She has years of demonstrated performance in this district, and the showings of support from those that have interacted with her are numerous. I can certainly understand why some might wonder, why not conduct a search? I get it, I felt the same way. But looking through the lens that we have here, from this position, there really wasn't a good reason to do it. And frankly, if a private business had an internal candidate that was as a high performer with an impeccable track record like Mrs. Costello, they wouldn't do either. Lastly, I'd like to point out that for those that haven't had the opportunity to see Mrs. Costello in action or hear her speak, I can tell you she has her own vision for the school district, one that I believe parents and community members would be very pleased to learn about. She has the benefit of legacy knowledge as well as a set of ambitions for the district that are all her own. I have 3 young daughters myself. They're still in elementary school at VMS. Their education is a top priority. I would not be supporting Mrs. Costello or this process if I didn't think it was in their best interest to proceed in this manner.
Does anyone else have anything that they want to share?
It was very well said. I echo what both of them said in a wonderful points.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is full support. I think that's good.
I just want to add one thing. Everything he said, pretty eloquent, and I agree with it. I do not have anything prepared to speak so eloquently. But I would just add that given everything we've experienced in the schools in the past 2 years with all the COVID nonsense, the learning loss, the damage we've done to our students, to add another year of uncertainty onto that by going through the search process would just send our kids back even further. So to make this decision tonight to appoint Carol, at least gives us one thing that we know what the future is going to hold for the next however many years it turns out to be. There's still a lot of uncertainty going around, who the principals will be, what the structure will look like. But at least if we can get the head of the organization locked down, I think that will go a long way to trying to claw back from this devastating situation we're in with what we've seen in the data coming out recently. So I agree with everything you said, and I'm in full support as well.
I have a statement to read. It's not nearly as eloquent as these But, and I took parts of it from an email from a parent that had reached out last week, asking about why we were seeking the appointment versus the full search, why we were considering it. So this summer I learned that the school committee has the right to appoint rather than to do a large-scale search. And it's something we have discussed in executive sessions as well as on the floor, trying to determine if that was the appropriate route to take. In our quest, this board opted to interview Ms. Costello at our last meeting, with the vote on appointment following 2 weeks later. This was intentional, as we wanted to give ourselves the necessary time to consider this important decision while giving the community time to share how they felt about both the applicant and the process. To be honest, I had always assumed that we would do a large-scale search. However, given the great resignation that has been happening across the country, we had to really think this decision through. Scores of superintendents have retired, and many of the people seeking to fill superintendent seats have never worked at this level. Given Ms. Costello's vast expertise in curriculum and testing, the wonderful relationship she has with both the community and the staff, having been a former teacher and administrator, having been an assistant superintendent, and working with the administrative team, and having nearly 2 decades worth of experience in our district, she has a lot to offer us. We have 3 interim administrators and only 1 who is a veteran. We have 3 interim administrators and only 1 who is our veteran who stayed. Thank you, John. A new director of finance, a new facilities manager, and a still kind of new director of people and personnel. Due to all of that flux, we need someone who can help guide these leaders and the permanent principals we hire at the end of the year, rather than learning along with them. By hiring internally, Ms. Costello doesn't have to spend the year familiarizing herself with how things are done or building trust as an external hire would need to do. She can get right down to business. And while she works well with Mr. Zangi, they are completely different people with different approaches and visions. It reminds me of that old wedding adage, we'd be getting something old and something new. Heavy emphasis on the new, not the old. I was able to work closely with Carol during contract negotiations this past spring. My respect for her grew greater when I saw how well she worked with both sides. She had a wonderful way about her, but was no pushover. I credit her with setting a nice tone and keeping the peace in negotiations, steadily moving us forward, making the whole process an effective one. This brings an important point. Anyone can tell us what we want to hear in an interview. With Ms. Costello, she has proven her capability and her excellence. We've received a handful of emails requesting we do a full search, but we've also received an overwhelming amount of support and gratitude for the possible appointment of Ms. Costello. I've had many district teachers, as well as parents from Berlin, where Ms. Costello used to be principal, reach out to share their enthusiasm for our consideration of such a qualified candidate in person. A veteran Boylston teacher that I have great respect for said, to me, Carol is the only candidate. Being a former educator myself, I knew how weighty these words were. In closing, a waning friend warned me that appointing Carol without doing a full search might cost me a seat in the upcoming election. It is important that the community know that I take this position seriously. My job is to do what is best for the students, given my bird's eye view of the situation. It is without hesitation and with great confidence that I feel Carol should be our next superintendent. Thank you. I'm sorry to tear up a little bit. Does anyone else have anything that they want?
Laurie, that was great. Thank you.
I mean, it wasn't theirs.
Yes, it was.
It was great. It was great. Thank you.
So it's clear that we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community, and it falls on both sides, but some heavier on one side than the other.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I've seen some of these emails, I've considered them, and I have my decision after considering that feedback.
Absolutely.
I think, Mike, it's important to know a lot of the feedback we got, on the negative side, was about the process, not about the person. I think to a T, the feedback we got about the person and the candidate was overwhelmingly positive, right? And so I think that's important. It was to Bob's point about optics, right? Doing the process and putting the process in place that might have better optics. We're more than sure.
I agree.
Yeah, we've not heard anything negative about Carol. It's just, I think people want to say they want to feel heard. And while I can understand that point of view, I think I'm in the same boat as what Bob was saying about the time and the money that we would spend when we already have a great person right here who already knows the ropes. It just doesn't make sense, not just for this committee, it doesn't make sense for our community, for the children. So I think, I agree, it's just a no-brainer.
Carol, would you want to say anything? You don't have to.
No, I'm sorry, my phone is going off. I don't think it's my children are watching. You know, I thank you for all your kind words. You know, I love this district. I told you that. I love the children here and the families, and I will work very hard for everybody. I will see you around and very visible and open to differences, to different opinions and different ideas. I don't know of all the answers for everything, you know, and I'd love to hear new ideas for how we can go forward together. And I appreciate the support of my team that's here and those who are at home watching, and we'll go forward together, and that's my message to them, so very excited. Thank you.
So I think we're finished with that discussion. So we have a motion on the floor to affirm the appointment of Carol Costello as the next superintendent in schools. All in favor?
Aye.
I am an aye as well, opposed? The motion to approve the appointment of Carol Costello as the next superintendent of schools passes. All right, before we enter executive session, I would like to remind everyone of our upcoming meeting dates. We're going to meet on October 11th, and we have October 25th as an as-needed week. Could I have a motion to enter executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, Superintendent Zangi and Assistant Superintendent Costello, and not to return to open session? Second?
Second.
Discussion. Oh, sorry, no discussion. We have to do a roll call vote. Adam?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Julie?
Aye.
Oh, boy, no, it's because that seat was there. All right, the motion to enter executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel passes. We will not be returning to open session. Thank you for